Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to review the Eachine LAL5, and what a beast this quad is. And before we get started with this review, honestly, I have to say that another reviewer out there, kind of one of my favorites, actually, one of my go-to guys that I kind of go brush up on certain things once in a while, and I was interested to see what other reviewers thought of this quad, because what we have here sitting on the bench from Eachine is almost like an experimental freestyle 4K rig with a lot of bells and whistles on here that really aren't talked about as I feel they should be. Now, number one, this is a hybrid freestyle 4K drone with Caddx Tarsier V2 on here, thus removing the need to have a GoPro on there. That's the whole point of this quad. The other reviewer seemed to get a faulty Tarsier board. Maybe he had to rebuild it and put a new one on there, because we do have a lot of spare parts since we get new stuff all the time. But the entire point of this quad is that you don't have to carry a GoPro. The other point of this quad is that it's supposed to be a 6S freestyle beast with bigger motors on here than I've practically seen on any type of 6S rig to come in my door, and that was surprising. The 2507 motors are giant, and typically you'd see these motors on something larger like a 6-inch quad or a 7-inch quad frame, even 8-inch. You can almost put an 8-inch prop on here if you were using it for a camera drone. But these are race motors. They are spec'd out for 6S. They have a really nice coating on the top, really nice copper coils on the inside, and I'll show you those in detail in a little bit. You've got TPU bumpers, 50 amp ESCs on here, and you have an F405 flight controller with Maytech firmware, which is also very good firmware. You also have Bluetooth on here. You have SpeedyB Bluetooth, which is phenomenal to have on here, and they do have a separate 4-in-1 ESC on the very bottom. Mine came spec'd out to run BL Heli 1200 as well, so it is running BL Heli 1200. You can crank it back to 600 if you'd like, but they did try to save some weight with the frame itself. You can see the top plate. It's around a 3mm top plate, 5mm replaceable arms. They have their heat shrink on the outside of the arms already for you, which is nice. Your 5G antenna in the back here. It's a little stubby, and you could actually trim this back a little bit to give you a little bit better reception. They also have 2 posts for antennas to come out the back, but I didn't get posts in my box. You can do a top mount battery, or you can do a bottom mount battery on this quad, which is cool. There is a space down below the frame right here for a strap to get through, which is cool, above and below the flight controller. And you got to be careful because the Caddx Tarsier cable goes underneath here, so don't run the strap through here, put it through here. You can see just barely right there that it's a pretty long cable. Your Caddx Tarsier is sitting back here on this 20x20 mount, so it's a combo 20x20 and 30x30 mount. And right at the top right there, this is where this is really nice. You have smart audio on here, and you have a VTX up to 800 milliwatt. For freestyle guys out in big open air flying, big field flying, and behind trees and at bandos, this is great. 800 milliwatts cranking. And it's a half-size VTX, so if you look over on this side, it's only sitting about halfway across that VTX, or across the flight controller right there. Smart card can go in here as well on your F4 for black box, and back here on this side is where your smart card goes in for your Caddx Tarsier V2. So I use a 32 gigabyte Extreme Plus card, which works really well. Doesn't freeze up and lose and drop a lot of frames. And over on this side on the Tarsier, if you've never used this before, it's fairly easy to use. First thing I do is usually hold this button right here on the back and hold it down until the Wi-Fi shows up. This is the Wi-Fi button. The next one up is the on-off button, which will also start and stop the recording. So if you see the blinking light when it starts up, it means that it's recording, and you can press it again to stop it. Now I am testing some of the HQ R42 props. I mentioned that they might be R45 earlier, but I just got them in, and these are actually R42s. Super nice hybrid race prop. It's kind of a thick cord in the base, and then thinner out toward the tip, so you get a nice low end power if you need it, and it's pretty smooth on high throttle. This quad does have a pretty decent tune for the power system on board. At the high end of the throttle, I felt like I was getting a little vibes, and it may be because of that thicker cord prop. You could try some thinner cord props on the 6S setup. Sometimes when you have high power type of motor, if you use a little thinner cord prop, something like a 5140, the Nazgul 5s would actually work pretty well in here. It'll also save you some flight time. So since you do have a really large motor on here, if you want a little bit longer flight time, that's what I'm going to suggest. Use the Nazgul 5 5140s. It's also nice that they have a TPU bumper all the way around the outside edge of the frame, protecting the bottom down here and the bolts. And the motors themselves, you can see LAL5 printed on that side, 2207 or 2507. And these are spec'd out for 6S. So these motors can handle 4S batteries as well if you guys want to fly 4S on here. My recommendation for 6S with this power system is going to be something like a 6S 1300 to get you over 3 minutes. Most of you guys want over that 3-minute flight time, and that's honestly what's going to get you over 3 minutes. If you're using something like a 6S 1050, it's going to get you just shy of 3 minutes. If you are cruising with this quad in the field, I did notice that even at like 25% throttle, this quad was hauling ass across the field, and it's mainly due to the power system on board. The 2507 motors are freaking gigantic. At full throttle, the punch out is insane. You will have to have a fairly new battery to be able to handle a full throttle punch out. One other thing that I did notice is that even though I said full throttle, they have a limit on there. They have a throttle limit to 80%. So you're not getting full throttle punch out, actually. They're cutting it back a little bit, which is kind of good for us, which is nice because you're not going to sag out your battery too much. But again, you will need some fairly new batteries to run on this quad. If you're getting your first freestyle quad, like I said before, this quad is primarily for learning how to fly freestyle with a lot of power and being able to run a 6S battery and not have to carry a GoPro. It's the whole point of this quad. Let's go ahead and do a weigh-in real quick, and then we'll go fly. So the LAL5 as it sits is right around 415.4 grams, and that is in the heavier realm of freestyle quads. Now when you add the Tattoo 6S 1050 battery on there, it's getting up just under 600 grams. So you're at 585 grams, 585.4. So if you add the 1300 on there, like the 6S 1300, you're going to be just above 600 grams. It's not shy about its weight, but then again, you're running super big motors on here, and you kind of have to deal with that extra weight if you want these type of motors on this quad. If you want high speed, that's what this quad's all about. And I think that I knew right away when I got the quad that it was going to be a super fast quad, mainly because of the motors. But then I looked at the KV on these motors, and it's on a little bit higher spectrum of 6S motor KV that I traditionally prefer. What I prefer for a 6S motor KV is around 1750. That's kind of the sweet spot for me. 1650 for long range, 1750 for freestyle, 1850 is what these are spec'd at. So I knew that they were going to eat a little more battery than I was used to. So let's go ahead and do some flight footage, and you guys can check it out and see what you think. Here we go. All right, guys, now it's time to do the Fpv flight test, and I wanted to show you my first pack because this is where I was getting used to it. If you look in the bottom left of the screen, you're going to see the Caddx Tarsier camera and the VTX performance. Across the middle of the screen, that's the 4K Tarsier downsampled to a 1080p, and YouTube probably hasn't done it justice, so it doesn't have the greatest compression, but this is looking pretty good. It feels pretty good. The flight tune on here is actually pretty decent. I was surprised that it flies really smooth. I feel like there might have been some jitter at the very top end of the throttle around the 80% mark, but again, whoever put this quad together and set it up in the flight controller, there is an 80% limit on the throttle, and that might be either in my radio or the flight controller. I didn't check, but I did notice that when I punched out full throttle, it only went up to 80. So it's not 100% punch out on here, which is actually kind of good for what we're doing here with this quad. You don't want this quad to just burn up midair on too long of 100% throttle punch, because you should really only be momentarily doing 100% throttle punches. It can really sag your battery, and sometimes it can cause problems with your battery. So watch out for those super high bursts on the throttle. Also, speaking of throttle, guys, notice the bottom left screen there. I'm cruising at 25 to 35% throttle, maxing out about 40. I just kissed a tree, so there's some sap on the lens, but I'm going to go for a power loop anyway while we're up. It's a little bit hazy now, but look how much height I got out of those motors. Just playing around with throwing some extra spins in there. So this quad will do anything you want freestyle wise. It's still a little bit hazy there, but it will do power loops all day long. You can come in a little bit late and still catch yourself at the bottom end of a loop, which is super nice. Some of the other quads will bottom out and you'll hit the ground and tumble. But again, it has some serious speed, man. This quad gets across the field super quick with these big shoes it's wearing. So back around this tree, little whip off the end of the tree, another flip, and let's go back down and do another power loop. I mean, this quad's crazy. It's definitely the muscle car of 6S. And look at there. I was able to just whip back out of that tree and not tree it. Don't ask me how I did that. That was super lucky. And now back through these trees, a little bit loose through the trees. So if you were going to try to race with this quad, you want to dial back these rates way back. Make it a little bit smoother. It is quite loose. And I'm running those new HQ R42 props on here today. They have a nice power output at the low end around the loops, and they're quite smooth in the air. When you first try out a prop for the first time and you listen to it when it comes off the ground, you can tell whether it's going to be sort of a vibey prop or it's just a little off balance. These seem to do very, very well. There's no jello in the Cadex Tarsier at all, which is really nice. So a combination with a nice prop and a nice tune on the flight controller gives you a really nice jello-free video. And that's the most amazing thing about this quad, is that it has all this power, right? And then it's still able to bring home nice video. I feel like at the very top end of the throttle, there might have been some jitter and a little bit of kickback from these props. But again, if you want to prop down, you can do some 50, I believe they're 5140s, the Nazgul 5 props, a little bit thinner cord, and it'll fly even smoother, maybe even increase your flight time a little bit. Could add 30 seconds onto your flight, who knows. Not quite as aggressive as the R42s. The R42s are meant to give you some bite, but also still be nice and smooth. Going back for another power loop. Back in a little bit late under that tree. Plenty of power to come back around, no problem. And this is the joy of flying without a GoPro on there, guys. You don't feel that extra weight, and you don't need the extra power when you come back around from a loop or doing some big maneuver. If you have the extra weight of a GoPro on there, the extra 100 grams is going to make you use more throttle to pull yourself out of those type of freestyle maneuvers. So it's going to also shorten your flight time. It just feels better without the GoPro on there, honestly. The years that I've been flying, I usually do prefer to fly without a GoPro on there. I suffered a lot in the first 3 years of FPV because I really didn't like the way that quads felt with the GoPro on there. It just felt like it changed the flight characteristic. It made it heavier, and back then we were running smaller motors, 2204, 2205, We started out flying like 1806s on 3S. So we've come a long way with our power systems, and now we're finally to the point where they seem to be playing around with moving up motor sizes. And this is just an example of that. It's almost like an experiment. That's why I would kind of call it like a hybrid freestyle quad with 4K on there. And mostly nice because it does not require a GoPro. And I've said it before, you know, if you want to put a GoPro on a quad, don't buy the LAL5. Buy this one purely to fly it freestyle and just rip without the GoPro on there. And you're just going to have a much better flying experience with this quad. Because honestly, it just doesn't need it, you guys. It flies awesome without it. So let's go ahead back into the studio. Let me give you some final thoughts and suggestions for the LAL5 in case you decide to get one. But I gotta say, I'm not disappointed with this quad at all. I think it's pretty good for what it is. Let's go back. Here we go. All right, guys, welcome back from the flight test. So what did you think about that? I'm running like 25 to 35% throttle most of the time during that flight test, and I was smoking on 25 to 35% throttle across the field. I mean, it has a really nice flow as far as the feeling of the flight controller. It feels really locked in. My lines were super precise with it. I think that I could dial back the rates a little bit on it because it did feel a little bit loose at times. And I had some blowout in the corners when I'm cornering around the trees. You guys have seen me go around those trees a lot with a lot of different quads. And one of the things about having a more powerful type of power system on a quad is that it gives you that extra bit of throttle that you're not quite used to. So you kind of have to get used to all the power that's at your fingertips, so to speak. So power without control is you're losing your edge on your lines when you're making runs around the trees. And if you're practicing those freestyle maneuvers that you want to be super tight, when I get a quad like this, sometimes I feel like I'm learning how to fly it again all over from scratch. But I think they got a lot of stuff right on this quad. And again, my opinion is that this is not a quad for a GoPro. If you want to buy a quad that has a traditional analog camera and slap a GoPro on it, go buy that quad. That's not what this quad is. This quad is strictly for the Tarsier onboard footage. You can add a GoPro on this quad if you want. You can get yourself a couch and do it. There is a little bit of room, not a whole lot of room for it, but again, that's not what this quad is for. So in my opinion, keep the GoPro off this quad and you're going to enjoy it much more. You're also going to shorten your flight time a lot by adding that extra weight of the GoPro. So you know, the extra weight of the GoPro, and I believe it's around 150 grams. No, actually 111.3. 111.3. So you're getting yourself way up there in the range if you add a GoPro. So let's just weigh it real quick. I'm just curious. Let's just do this. So 526 grams. Now with the 6S 1050, yeah, close to 700 grams. You're 697 grams. That's ridiculous. Don't put a GoPro on this quad. It's not what it's for. In my opinion. That's just my opinion though, so take it with a grain of salt. But again, always my honest opinion on stuff on the channel, you guys. So hopefully this review helps you in taking a look at the LAL5. I think that it's definitely different than anything else out there I've seen, and I was quite happy to get it and open the box. And the box also has a lot of extras in there, so it's a pretty decent value. Around, I think it's around $229, around the $200 price point. So pretty decent, and lots and lots and lots of options. But thanks again for watching, guys. I'm Justin Davis. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one.